We gaan beginnen.
I'm currently a trainer for Scrum facilitators, but I'm also an Agile coach with the Dutch police, coaching a detective team who is fighting cybercrime here in my hometown in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And so I have two jobs, basically. Sometimes it also feels like it, but things like this make me feel like it's not two jobs. One is a hobby that's turned into a job, and that's this one. And I've also been blessed to know Chris and Robin. I've worked with Robin at a previous employer also. To have been at the start of the PSPO advanced training, which was very fun, and it's a very fun training. So if you want to know more about this topic or other topics, then that's a real deep dive. It's really cool. And you might also find some a article of me about how the increment works, in my opinion, in police work. And that's in this awesome book with a lot of tips and advice also for product owners on Scrum. Edited by Gunther Verheijen. So that's some personal advertisement, and now I'm gonna move on quickly to the content, of course. So I want to start out first with a small quiz, and you can just type it in the chat. And the question for you is, how does your team feel about measurements, about metrics? So not just you, but your team, or the teams working on your product. Please type A, B, or C in the chat window. Ooh, I see a trend. This metric is exploding. It's also very nice to see so many people active this early in the morning. For me, it's early at least. Just got the kid to school. Ah, that's a nice one. Dennis types A, B, or C depending on the weekdays. That's cool. I see mostly B's and some C's, and that's nice, because then you might get some value from this half hour. So let's see what we can do about it. For the people, the one or two people that did A, very nice. We will ask you what you're measuring, right? So to get into that and see if we can still improve on that. B is really the danger zone, and we will see why in a few slides, because that's the zone where people say, oh, we'll just play along, but that does not lead to better outcomes, right? And C, that's the one where, yeah, people have been hurt probably by metrics. And we'll also see which dark patterns are there and how you can prevent them probably. So it's really nice to see this interaction, and let's see what we can do about it and how this connects to evidence-based management, which we'll be talking about. So now just type some more stuff in the chat so we can see a bit what you're coming for, what you want to learn. So I'm curious what you want to learn. So type in the chat. What question would you like to get answered about measuring outcomes, about EBM, about metrics in general? Let's see if we can get some focus out of it, because I also always have more content than the time allows. So let's see, what are you here for? Okay. Which KPIs to use? KPIs for management team, yes. How to measure value, good one. How do you know what a good metric is? That's also a nice one. We'll get into that. Which should be avoided, yes. Outcomes and KPIs, okay. How to collect them smartly. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay, there's a lot of stuff there. I have some ideas now, and I think we're going to cover most of it pretty well. But there's, of course, also the community that Xebia hosts, where you can ask more questions and help each other with insights. Because I think a lot of these things, some of you already know the answer to some of the challenges you're posting here. So please also use the community to interact and find more and deepen your learning after this webinar. So let's see what we can bring to you. Oh. Yes. So what I want to talk about today is the pitfalls of measuring. So there were some questions about that, so that we're going to get into that. And then the concept of EBM and why it is a useful tool, or it can be a useful tool, of course. There are no silver bullets when you're doing agile product development, right? And maybe some examples of EBM in the wild. We'll see if we have them, and close off with 3 things to get started. It's like the regular flow of this thing, right? So let's dive in. Pitfalls. We're going to play pitfall bingo, and I've never done this before, so it's a small experiment. I'm going to reveal pitfalls on the screen, and if you recognize it, you can use the let's see, there's this respawn thing with make a confetti or give a thumbs up or a heart. I don't care. If you recognize
it's a reactions button in your Zoom screen, in the most right button in your panel. Well, not the most right, that is end. Don't touch that, but
that one
next to that.
So this is going to be interesting because I cannot see everyone, but I hope this works, right? So who recognizes this one? Top-down enforced metrics. Like everyone is measuring this. We have to do this. Yeah, this is the best way to get answer B from the opening. Like, okay, yeah, so we do it. Okay, so it's not yet C territory. This is not traumatizing yet, right? Okay. Then we move to the next one, comparing teams. Who's seen this? Using metrics to compare teams. Yeah. I think that's the crying emoji, so not crying of laughing. This is C territory. This is really traumatizing, right? Because it's just, you cannot compare teams based on most metrics. That's just the best way to destroy productivity, happiness, and your outcomes. Let's see. No support from the wider organization. So you have a Scrum team that wants to measure stuff, but they need something from planning and control or from the data lake team or whatever. Yeah. So the organization is keeping you from actually tracking valuable stuff. Yeah, happens a lot. It's terrible because then you don't measure what's valuable, right? Okay. Teams have no access to the relevant data. Who recognizes this? This is actually a variety of the previous one, right? But it could also be that they're just not measuring it. Yeah. The measure becomes the goal. We've seen this. Yes, Bob has seen it, Dennis. I have just a few people in my screen, so I see. It's nice to see everyone playing along. Thank you. Yes, if the measure becomes the goal, you get really bad results. There's already stories from this in the Vietnam War, actually, where they set a measure of Viet Cong killed. They had targets on it, and they had to have a certain amount of Viet Cong killed. But what happened is, who determines if they're Viet Cong that's killed? Well, it's the soldiers killing them. So they were killing all kinds of civilians and saying, oh, we killed a lot of Viet Cong. Not a good outcome. Anyway, let's move to the next. The measure drives unwanted behavior. Yeah, that's actually what I just talked about, right? And you have probably experienced it. Gerrit has experienced it. Dennis has experienced this, yes. And you have to really look out for this. So if you make a goal out of a measure, then you can almost guarantee that people will start trying to game it, especially if you tie bonuses into it or try to reward it. Don't do it. And this one is also very cool. I've had this very often. Like, we're measuring some stuff, but why is it relevant to our goals, right? Measuring hours worked. Lines of code, for those who know about the technical stuff. Lines of code is a terrible crap measure because more code does not equal more value. So last one, and this is really important because we're working in Agile Product Management. Set and forget. Who's seen this? We're going to start measuring, and 2 years later, we're still measuring the same things, and we're not learning anything. Yes. So in an Agile world, we have to inspect and adapt. So there's a lot of pitfalls. So I would say almost it's hopeless. And that's also the thing. It's hard. It's hard to do good measures, and you really need to make time to inspect and adapt on your measures. So a few examples. I'm not going to go into each one, but I thought I'd share this because this is really good stuff from a book I have about metrics. I'm going to grab it really quickly to show it to you. And we'll make sure we also share the links. The key performance illusions. It's also for the people asking about KPIs. KPIs are almost always illusions. It's a book by Koen de Bruin, and he wrote a whole book about why metrics are dangerous and how to prevent that, and it meshes nicely with the EDM concept. So the net promoter score, the school grades, stock prices, they're all examples of stuff that we tend to measure and tend to value that we measure them, but they're actually really dangerous. For instance, school grades, there's the danger of trying to get a normal distribution in a very small set of people, classroom. Some people may remember this, that there was always discussion in school, in high school, at my school at least, that the school grades had to be distributed. So a few people fail, a few people get A's, and most people get like a 6 or a 7. Totally rubbish for a very small set of people, of course. So other things are employee engagement. It's really hard to measure. What is employee engagement? And election polls, that's relevant today in the Netherlands. We're voting here, general elections. And polls are notoriously dangerous because people don't do what they say. We just don't. We are irrational people. We want to give answers that so that people like us. And that's maybe also a struggle sometimes for your product owners, right? It's so hard to say no sometimes to stakeholders. Not for everyone, obviously, but so you cannot really trust what people say. You have to really try to measure what people do. That's the crux of this slide. So what are you currently measuring? Please use the chat window again. The things you're measuring, I don't want to get your exact measures, but just try to think, okay, am I measuring how much work goes in? Am I measuring the activities, more outputs, more outcomes? Where's your focus of your measurements? Please type in the chat window, where's your focus of your measurements? Yes. Okay, nice. A little bit of everything. That's nice. Yes. So that's cool. The title of this webinar is Measuring Outcomes, right? So it's no secret that we want to try to measure outcomes because they represent the value. As product owners, you want to maximize value, and the outcomes are how a user uses our output to achieve stuff, and that's valuable. That's why they buy your product or use your product at least. And the impacts are the second order outcomes actually. So maybe for the environment of the user, but also for your company. And it's easy to measure outputs and activities and inputs because they're in your sphere of control. For measuring outcomes, you have to go outside of your sphere of control. You have to track users, right? And see how their behavior changed. That's the outcome. And the previous webinar also talked about it, the Lean UX one. So also in the Lean UX, it's very important. Why is Lean UX important? Because we do assumptions between outputs and outcomes. When we're planning or we're thinking of great features for our products, we think, oh yeah, this is going to be great. We make this thingy, and then the user is going to go, wow, I want to use this. Here's my money. That's all assumptions. We don't know for sure, so we have to measure, we have to validate. And some stuff you can validate internally, like having internal stakeholders in a review that say, oh, we know these people, we're from the sales department, we know we're going to sell it. And then the people get it in their hands and they say, oh, well, nah, this is too much hassle. It's not enough value. And then it doesn't work. So you always have to go to the end user for the outcomes, right? And that's because we humans are so unpredictable. It's just terrible. Some stuff is predictable, by the way. It's a whole nudge theory, but we can't go into that here. But most isn't. So you have to validate. Then we get into the EBM, because EBM is then a tool to counter all these pitfalls, all these troubles with measuring, because it's easy to measure things that don't really represent value. It's hard to measure the outcomes. And the framework can help you decide what you want to measure. And also remember to measure also the value part. And what you see here is that the framework has in the center agility and business value, because that's what it focuses on. And that it has 4 sectors. So we have the value part at the top. We have unrealized value. That's the value that we potentially see in the market. It can be added market share. It can be new user wants and needs that aren't fulfilled yet by our product or other products. That's a gold mine, right? If there's no product yet there, then we have to go there. And the current value says something about how well our product is currently addressing the user needs, the current value. And then at the bottom, we have the more agility measures. So actually this part of the image is the other way around. I still can't get the authors of this framework to change it, but the bottom is actually about the agility. It's about how fast we can get stuff out. So how short is our feedback loop? That's the time to market. And how much time relative to other efforts of the investment we make in coding, in everything we do in our work, all our activities actually, can we convert in doing new stuff, in improving, in changing our product so we potentially deliver more value. So you can imagine if you have a low ability to innovate and a long time to market, that you're really slow at adapting to new insights. And because we cannot predict our users' behavior, that's going to be a problem. So we both need a short feedback loop, that's represented in time to market, as to help our teams and organizations to free up time to try new stuff. Because obviously, every new stuff we do is going to work, right? No, not everything's going to work. So we have to have enough time to also fail and then learn. And get some stuff, like 20% of the stuff we try out that does work, right? So aside from these categories, these are the key value areas. The current EBM guide, if you read it, there's also a pretty good introduction about approaching goals. And this may mesh well with the newly introduced product goal in the Scrum guide. Because before this wasn't there, there's now a product goal. It's like an intermediate goal, something between the vision and the sprint goal that you want to reach with your product. And EBM can really help getting that concrete, because EBM talks about getting a strategic goal that's far ahead, like a product goal, and defining intermediate goals and then stepping toward them. And then you have to measure, of course, if you reach those goals, right? So I'm going to skip a few slides because I already explained the separate values, but if you get the slide deck later, there's slightly more information about each of the different areas and which questions we are trying to answer if we measure in those areas. And you will see in each of these things that there are always, it's about people. Because those are the people, those are the things that we want to change the behavior of to see if we have a valuable product. Even if you have like a microservice that's only connecting to other machines, still in the end, the value is probably in people, in something you change with people. It will be harder to get to the people there. Anyway. So these are all the different areas. Then I want to move on to, well, okay, so what can you measure in these areas? And in EBM, that's really handy. If you have no clue, there's a lot of tips. There's a lot of tips. There's an appendix, and this is where Chris really helped in the translation also to Dutch, because he actually did the full translation of the appendix with all suggested metrics. And be very careful, EBM is not a framework that you install and you do all these measurements and then you get successful. No. You have to really think, does this help me? Does this work for our organization, for our product? What is important? Because if you measure everything, you don't have focus, right? So you really have to think also about which goal am I trying to reach, which value am I delivering, and which of these metrics may fit. You cannot read this, right? That's why I put the magnifying glasses on it. But in the guide, of course, it's bigger. But this is a lot. There's a lot of measures. And because it's also very important that you define measures that fit with your team and your product, it's also important to have this discussion with your team. Well, that's kind of hard, you know. Are you going to read the guide together? Are you gonna do suggestions for them, because there's a lot here and the team cannot choose? That's where my friends and I, Scrum facilitators, came up with a game to facilitate this. If you can get into a room again, I hope soon. We have made a card game where we have all these suggested KVMs. We have the KVAs, and you can facilitate the discussion. You can just put them on the floor, have people put them under the correct matching value area. Okay, we're gonna measure, let's see, give an example, cycle time. Okay, cycle time, that's one of the example measures, and someone mentioned it also, so that's why I'm saying it. Which one is it? What do we measure with this? Do we measure the current value with cycle time? No. What do we measure? Oh, time to market, yeah, someone puts it there. Or if someone puts it somewhere else, you have a discussion, right? Why would you think that it says? So you explore the different measures and what they mean. And then you can also ask the team to highlight, okay, what do you think is important to measure? Do we have one of the areas where we're not measuring yet? And what does that mean? How can we start? So you can really have a fruitful discussion by really exploring physically the thing. And the game is this big. So you really can be with a group of people, like 12, 15 people around it, and really interact with it. That's we sell it, of course. That's our product, and we hope it delivers some value. And the profits are about €2.50 that we get from it, and we put it in a fund so people can get free Scrum training with us that don't have money to pay for Scrum training. So we try to also give back to the community in that way. And you can download it digitally for yourself. If you have like a copy shop or a printer that prints high quality, you can get it for free. We will share the links later. But it's really good to really involve the team, because then you can tackle some of the pitfalls that leads to the team being meh or even traumatized, because they're really understanding why it's important to measure, and they also get some say in it, which is very important, because measures are not for management. Well, they are a bit maybe, but mostly for the team to improve how they can deliver value and help you as product owners. Because if you do everything yourself as a product owner, you have the only information about how to deliver value, you're going to have a tough job. Don't do everything. Anyway, to move on, these metrics are just some suggestions, right? There's one important metric that you cannot get from a standardized table. You can get some direction, but you cannot get it from a standardized table. So when you're measuring, you also have to really think about, okay, if we introduce a new feature in our product, or we have a certain product with certain features, how do we know if this feature, this part of the product, is successful? And the easiest way to get started is when you develop a new feature, to really, in thinking about this new feature, also think how we're going to measure the success. And in Lean UX, there's a lot of templates to do this. You also think about how it impacts the user and how you can measure it. And then you can sometimes also build it in, so you don't get the pitfall of not having the metric, right? You build it in the feature, especially if you have a software product. And then it's important, and this is a really simple mnemonic to remember how to approach this. It's the game approach. So you set the goal. What do we want to achieve with this feature? What do we want the user to achieve? Which actions, which behaviors does the user take if we are successful? How do we influence their behavior? Then how to measure it. We have to really think about how we measure it, how we represent it, because averages, just averages of something, is always bad. Yeah, it's not enough information to see if you're successful. So you have to really think, okay, how do we measure it? Which unit do we use? Is this really a good measure? Can we actually measure this? Or is this NPS or poll-like measure where people will gain it because they like us, you know? So try to bake it in, really see if you can measure the behavior of the user in using your product from the use of your product. That's the best way to get really hard data, or mix it up. So you can combine, of course, qualitative user interview style measures with actual usage data. So the kick is in number 5 here. Yes, we have to inspect and adapt. Don't set and forget. So the first one is probably not ideal, but we have to keep evaluating as we learn more about the feature, about how it impacts the user, what the user really wants, what is valuable, can we build it? We have to also adapt our metrics. Otherwise, we're in the end doing something totally different because we're agile, and then we're measuring based on the previous knowledge. That's no good. So we have to learn there too. So I mentioned it a few times, previous episode, for those who were there. These are metrics, and these are really good, and they can really help in certain situations. Some of these are also in the EBM framework, and some are separate. But if you really want to start somewhere, it's also really good to look at these small frameworks and see if you can learn from this. The pirate metrics are like the marketing funnel. It's especially really good if you're still looking to get more traction for your product. And the hard metrics are made by Google. That's also really interesting to talk about. And here you also see in the hard metrics, the goals, the signals, and the actual metrics, right? This is the goal, the behavior, the activity, and the stuff we use. So there's really a lot of overlap in these approaches. Anyway, we're nearing the end. This is also from the previous one. This is where the value is. You have to really measure the behavior. For those who weren't there, look up the slides. It's really, really also powerful info, but it's a repetition. But we're coming to close. I hope you found it valuable. There's some stuff you can do to start out. And if you're not measuring value yet, so if you're not having any measures, if you go dive into the framework in the top, if you look at the KVM list, like you're not getting anything in that top quadrant, please start looking at the current value. And then this will also tell you something about your unrealized value. So it will also help you decide where to invest next. However, if your car is not moving fast enough, you're not going to reach your destination in time before the competition is there. So as soon as you're doing current value, also look at the underlying agility metrics. Time to market, how fast are we delivering, and also how is our conversion of energy into new stuff, because we have to be adaptive. And if you already have them, look really good at where they would fit in the framework, or if they're not, for example, in the examples, but they are standard metrics, have a discussion with your team. Why are we measuring this? What are we learning from it? Is it really helping us? And how could we alternatively measure it? So really investigate if they're measuring the desired behavior. And please also take the pitfall list and see if you can have some more things to check off in your current organization, because that's also something to dive deeper in. And I believe you are mostly all product owners, so please also use your Scrum Master to help you with this, because they often also know very much about how stuff influences a team. They can facilitate the workshop for you, etc. So don't do it alone. That's one of the most important things. And focus on the people, both on your own people, as well as the users you're gonna.
As we did today, Sjoerd, because I'm more a product owner, you're more a Scrum Master, which explains why you kept exactly to the time box, whereas I usually skip over it. Thank you.
This is really, really not often that this happens, so I'm really proud of myself right now.
You did a good job. Hey, yeah, so very, very good tips. The best tip I can give you is go and get that game. And it seems kind of funny to make advertisement for a competitor's product, but I really love what they do with the money, because they put it in a fund and they give it to people that are less fortunate than us and cannot pay for this training. So it really helps out people in these times of COVID-19 to get the training that they need to get better in their jobs or to get a new job. So I wholeheartedly recommend that you go out there and do that. And of course, the added benefit of talking to your team about fun measurements.
Yes, and I also saw some questions about management teams. You can, of course, also have this discussion with your management. They like cards as well. that's fine.
Absolutely. I'll put a link to the game in the community website where you found the link to the seminar. So you will find the recording there, the slides, and I'll put everything that you need there to get further on. Yeah.
Yes, awesome.
Leaves me to thank Sjoerd for his cooperation and his wonderful presentation. Thanks, man. And have a great day. Go fight crime.
I will. And go out and vote, everyone, if you're in the Netherlands. Please do. Use your democratic rights.
All right. See everybody. See you next week.
Chris, one question. Chris, one question about value. I'm wondering whether we had a session with respect to how we measure value in governmental initiatives.
Yep.
I worked in the last time a lot of time with government things, and we say now we have no value. So it's about non-profit, this kind of business. We don't have business value, and then you have a lot.
It depends a bit on which part of the government we're talking about.
For instance, Central Administration Office, Dutch Railways, you can, But I had,
Well, maybe
this kind of situations where you have a lot of focus on output.
Yes.
But maybe it's a great one for sure, because in police work, I don't think it's all about making more money.
Yes, exactly. No, it's about making the most of the activities you do, right? So we really have to. And in police work, it's a bit difficult also because we have to be able to turn on the dime. So we're not really doing Scrum per se there. We're using agile ways of working to enable team ownership. But in my research for this presentation, I came across a lot of topics, especially when I looked up the flow of activities through outputs, outcomes to impacts. A lot of publications from government agencies, actually, that were, I think for about 20 years, there was also already discussion globally, not everywhere, obviously, but about focusing on the outcomes and how you're going to measure if you're successful with programs, projects, and initiatives. Because this whole idea of that outcomes are important is, of course, not new to agile working. It's also in project management and program management. Yes, Dorn.
Actually, my point would be whether we can somewhere in the future, I'm not sure whether, Chris, you have something similar in your mind, maybe to address one time, half an hour or something. One of the future session about how you measure value in this, or how we should, or ideas,
Yeah, I'm sure we can do something around that.
I'd be happy to join again.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
The only thing that the direct experience that I'm aware of was with Greenpeace, and they express value as the number of people which they gave a different mindset when it comes to preserving nature or being more mindful about your environment. And they actually measure that, and they try to measure whatever they do to, did this work? Did we change their mindset? And money is secondary. Yes, you have to have money, otherwise you can't print the flyers anymore. But that's not the goal. So they express value really in what is the change that we made in the world. And for governments, it's usually something around a service that you provide. And there's a way that you either provide social benefits or environmental benefits, and you can measure that.
Yes.
Definitely, and of course, it's also about having some ideas to have some things that you can fall back in the moment that some of your direct stakeholders, I'm Scrum Master, coach, so they are pushing back because this is also change. It's also changing the mindset. So so you are able, to have your ammunition in order to try to convince, actually first talking in their language and then try to do some influence and start the change. So it's also about the agile growth of the within governmental institutions and so
Yeah.
on. We can, I think that we can talk hours about it.
Yes, it all starts with who are we doing this for? Who are we working so hard for? Or maybe not hard enough in some cases, in government agencies I've met. But that's where you start. And then that also gives you some direction for measuring outcomes, I think. But anyway, if Chris, you decide to do a focused half hour on measuring value in government environments, I would be very interested to join.
Absolutely. All right.
Because it's
Let's
extra
see if we
hard.
can make that happen.
Yes.
All right. And with that, I think this is a great point to start the day. Thank everybody
Yes.
for being here and see you next time.
Thanks again.
And special thanks to you, Sjoerd. See you around.
My pleasure. Bye.
Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this episode, move on to the next one. Or
join us or follow us on Medium and LinkedIn to get inspired with even more content.
come to our training.